Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Kathy Klotz-Guest. Kathy is a speaker, author, and comedian. She spent 16 years leading story development and tech, in almost 24 years crafting stories on improv and comedy stages. Today, she helps leaders transform using comedy tools, and her clients include Amazon, Cisco, IBM, United Way, and many more. All of that sounds amazing, but there's just one little problem. Kathy's brand is based on her being a storyteller and being funny. And being a funny storyteller is exactly what my brand is about. Is there room for the two of us? Or is this just like the movie Highlander, where there can be only one? I guess we're about to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, Kathy Klotz-Guest. Kathy, welcome to the show.
There can be only one. That's right. Oh, that's too funny. That's that right there. All right. I'm loving the intro. I'm loving the intro. There can be room. There can be room, right? Wouldn't it be a better world if everybody lightened up a little bit when they're telling stories and they embraced, even if it was just not, even if it wasn't like knee slapping funny, but it was just more fun and just had a lot more of a lighthearted sensibility. Wouldn't the world be better? I think
Well,
it would.
I think so, but a lot of the work you and I do
Yeah.
is with professional people, the
Yep.
corporate types.
Yep.
And there is this thing I heard from a good friend of mine who's a great presentation skills trainer. Although he will get angry if I say that he's a charisma booster. He's not a presentation skills trainer. And he always says, I think he said it, but anyway, that a speech can never be too short or too funny. Maybe I've added the too funny there, but too short or too funny. And I
Yeah.
and I truly believe that. And
Yeah.
most people agree with the too short, but they push back on the too funny. I don't feel
Mm.
you were gonna push back, but what are
No.
you? What's your take on that?
Oh, no. See, I agree. I think, humans by nature are flawed and idiosyncratic, and we make mistakes, and we have flawed heroes and heroines, right? So, what if we actually embrace that? So, I believe in funny, and I think we overthink it. So, I agree with your friend. I think the fear is, well, what if I'm not funny? Or, oh my God, I'm scared. And I think there is a point at which if your humor and your funny overtakes the message, then yes. Because we've all walked away from funny commercials and we were like, oh my God, that's so hilarious. Now, what was the product? What was that? And so there is a point where yes, if the humor overtakes the message, and yet if the message is very clear and crisp and so front and center, humor can only lift it. So you want to find that point, I'm going to get nerdy. You want to find that tangent point on the story curve where you are at the apex of you have a powerful message and humor gives it lift. And if you can do that, then you are in the right place at the right time. So yes, all of our stories could use a boost from just allowing that humor, that natural humor, not force, but the natural humor to come through. There's nothing better. Yeah.
The sort of the reflex I get when I hear you or other people that work with humor as one of their main
Mhm.
tools. uh, Part of the reflex I get from having worked with speakers for a very long time and having done some of this work myself is is sort of this resistance, not against humor, because humor is a big thing for me,
Yeah.
but this resistance with the idea that isn't when we're trying to already go for storytelling, but isn't humor one lift too many? Because this has been my experience is that getting people to tell stories is already a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Now, if you're getting people that are slightly more advanced, this is not the first time you worked with them, and now you're saying, okay, let's make this a bit more fun. No problem there. But don't you find that trying to get both of those things done, if you haven't spent a lot of time working with these people already, for some people it's just too much?
Yes. Yes. I 100% agreed. So my approach is really different. It's I think you got to get your story nailed down first. Let's get what is your message? Because without the message, you're you're a comedian, and I do stand up comedy and I do improv and I teach it. That's different. Now you're a comedian, and that's great. But the difference between a really grounded, amazing storyteller that's funny and a comedian is there's a powerful message. Although the comedian could have powerful messages too. It's just that their primary thing is to make people laugh. If you are telling a story, your primary message is to get to people's hearts and then minds, right? And if you're kind of going, gosh, I'm a little bit torn, which do I concentrate on first? Oh, you and I all know this. It's like, get the story nailed down first. If you have a great story, if you have a great message, now we can go back and ask ourselves, what humor tools can give this lift? Can we have blocking where the character just keeps falling down, keeps getting back up, and they can't help it? And really, the only difference between comedy and storytelling is that in comedy, that hero or heroine is so compelled to keep chasing that want and need, and to keep getting blocked. But there's humor in seeing somebody, they can't help themselves. They're going to keep getting back up because they are so compelled. You know what? Doesn't matter now how many times they get blunted. There are tools we can use. So the key to what you just said is, like, let's get clear on what you want to say and what is that story, what is that message? Because once you know that, I think the humor becomes a lot more organic. And typically I find where there's humor fear, it's because they're over focused on the humor without really knowing the story that they want to tell and what that transformation for the audience will be. Once you're clear on that, adding the humor tools that will heighten it, because comedy is just really storytelling on steroids. We've just heightened it. But without the storytelling backbone, it doesn't really matter. And I think what typically happens is, if I am working with corporate types, and we know that actually allays a lot of their anxiety, because I think the when we say let's be funny, everyone gets panic stricken like a deer in headlights because they're like, I have to make people laugh. Not really. First, get that story nailed down. Then let's find a way to transport that message through humor that is natural for you. Then people go, oh, I can do that. Exactly. Exactly.
I like how you say that you and I know that the message needs to be nailed on first and not the humor, because I suffer from this problem that you might suffer from too, which is the humor is so much fun
Yeah.
that part of my brain is going, but is this funny enough? It's a great message, but is it? If it's not funny enough, maybe I shouldn't use this one story. I'm gonna find a different one that is funnier. I've I've been guilty many times of
Yeah.
just enjoying the making people laugh part so much that I think the message is a bit flimsy, but I've got these three great stories that I can put together. And again,
Yeah.
this is not my professional stuff. This is when I was doing speaking or as taking Toastmasters or something. I was like, I've
Mhm.
got these three really funny
Yeah.
stories. Is there any possible message that I can use to kind of connect them, to
Yeah.
pretend that this is really a speech and not three separate stories? And people are like, the message was a bit wishy-washy. And I'm like, did you laugh? Yes, a lot. Great. My job here is done.
You know what? If it's always a balance, right? It really is, because we fall in love with different little bits that we love, and we're like, how can I work that in? How can I work that in? I've always felt that if your message can stand on its own without those bits, and then is just made better with those bits, then great. And we've all been there, Francisco, because I can relate. There's times I'm writing something and then I go, this is really funny. And then I have to ask myself, does it serve the story? Does it advance the story? And then I've realized that it really doesn't. It's a funny bit. So then I think to myself, okay, is there anything I can take from that bit and then put it into another story, and where that story really serves the transformation that I'm aiming for? So sometimes we have to be really hard critics of ourselves. And yet, I there is nothing wrong with allowing a bit to stand to get a laugh. I think that is a beautiful moment of human connection with your audience. It is a beautiful, profound moment. And sometimes we do have to make those hard choices, but it's beautiful when we don't have to, when we can go, you know what? okay, this bit is a warm up. It's not central to the message, but it's so profoundly human that it's a great segue. And as long as you can have an on ramp to your message and it doesn't derail the message, I say have fun. Have fun. Don't overthink it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never overthink it. That or anything else.
Well,
That's
you
not a
don't.
risk I'm running.
You don't want to overthink it because you and I both know that if we overthink it, we can talk ourselves into and out of so many things. But we just want to be in the heart of that story, so connected. And if the humor connects, then it's okay. It's okay to have some of those things. I call them just for me bits. If they make me laugh and I can sell it, then I think there's something about the audience going, you know what? That was genuine. That made me laugh. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. 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 Do it. If it makes you happy, do it.
There's something that I think might happen to you that doesn't really happen to me, which is this idea of people feeling scared or reluctant of the comedy, of the humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think in your case, one of the reasons that might happen is because you do two things that most sane people don't. You do stand up, which is one of the
Mhm.
most terrifying things ever,
Mhm.
and you do improv,
Yeah.
that a lot of people, myself included, hear and go, "Oh no, I really don't want to have to do anything remotely close to that." Whereas my approach to humor is, I'm just like a very poor excuse of a grown up, and I make horrible decisions on a regular basis, and I just don't hide them. That's essentially the basis of my humor. And people are like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Okay, let me give you an example. This was maybe 2 3 months ago. I was going out to teach at the MBA that I normally teach at, and as I'm just doing that last check in the mirror before I leave the house, I realized that my pants are a bit wrinkly, right? And I was like, I really don't have time to like get the pants off, iron them, and all that. So
Mhm.
I turn the iron on. I get one of those little water sprays. I spray my pants and I start ironing them while wearing them. And while I'm doing that, and I'm getting to some of the sensitive bits, and I'm going, I don't think this is a good idea. This strikes me as the type of thing that could go horribly wrong any moment now. And at the time, I'm doing it and going, but I'm still doing it. My
Yeah.
hands are still moving towards my parts with a hot piece of iron. Why am I not stopping? I'm not sure.
See what I well, that story's hilarious because we've all been there. Like we've all been there, right? It's like I don't have time to take this off and I'm gonna try to like, iron around. I'm gonna iron around the parts that I should be aware of. Well, here's the thing. I think there's a common misunderstanding about what humor and improv really are. Comedy is just storytelling. And the beauty, which you sort of illustrated so nicely, is that look, I think the misunderstanding is that we have to be somebody we're not, that we have to be this comedian and we have to, whatever that is, and we have to, have this, official title or whatever it is. And it's not the case. Yes, that is my experience. And comedy offers us a lot of tools that we can break down and use and that everybody can use. However, here's the thing comedy, like storytelling, is all about the truth. That's all it is. It's learning to tell the truth in a very comedically heightened way. That's all it is. So, you, me, anybody, even if they don't, they're not a comedian, that's great. Use your organic sensibility about the truth because when you lean into the truth, you will be funnier. You just told me a story that was just so funny because it was true. Like, if you lean into what's true, you are tapping into the most powerful humor there is, which is just being human. So here's my tip for those of you who overthink it, think, oh, it's I've got to be a comedian. No, because all comedy starts with truth, with just telling the truth. I just celebrated, 24 years married, voluntarily to the same guy. You know what? And I never considered divorce when things were hard. Murder? Yes. 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 Divorce? No. He's not getting half my stuff. And if we just talk about what it's like to be a human and to be married a long time or to have kids, right? It's like I was such a great mom before I had kids. It's like, it's my husband and I decided, with COVID being so hard, we decided we didn't want children. I'm just not sure how to tell our kids. They're not going to take it well. If we just talk about the human things, it's funny. It's funny because it's true. So I want people to remember this because it's such an important point. When you can just tell a story from a very honest, vulnerable, fully human, and you accepting and embracing your flaws, you accepting and embracing, the humanity of whatever situation, your audience will so relate to you. And in that moment, you can't help but laugh because it's true.
Yeah, one one approach that I find that tends to, I would not say get people closer to what happens to me, because I do tend to have a list of kind of weird things that I end up doing, just because in the
Mhm.
back of my mind I'm thinking this might be an absolute tragedy, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be funny, so I'm going to do it anyway. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't function that way,
Yeah.
but I find that if you ask people, okay, what embarrassing things have you either gotten yourself into over the last few years, or almost gotten yourself into, or thought about getting yourself into? Because sometimes you don't do this stuff. Sometimes you have better common sense than
Hmm.
I do, but you do think about it. It's like, what I really want to do right now is this thing, and then you don't do it, but you still thought about it. And that thinking about the horrendous thing that you really wanted to do, that alone is probably where the humor is. Now if you
Yeah.
actually did it, it might be funnier, but you know what, don't ruin your life for the sake of a joke.
No.
For the
Right.
sake of many jokes, maybe, not
Maybe,
one joke.
maybe not one. It's not worth it. The payoff has to be big. Yeah, just even one of the things that a great place to mine for really wonderful humor and stories is exactly that, Francisco. It's our inner monologue. What's happening up here? When we let people in on that, we all have that. Like, for me, it's like it reminds me of I don't know if you oh gosh, Elizabeth Gilbert had that Eat, Pray, Love book, and there's a movie that was done about it with Julia Roberts, and it's so hilarious because she tries to do meditation. She goes to this ashram and she tries to and she can't turn her mind off, and she's just like trying to okay, concentrate, concentrate. Ooh, lunch. Ooh, dinner. Ooh, there's a fly over there. Ooh, wine. What kind of wine? Should I call that guy? I don't know. And like her inner monologue, and it's very funny because it's just true. And so one of the ways that we can tap into that is it doesn't even have to be a story about what we did, but just if we're revelatory and vulnerable about just our own human thoughts. Audiences love that because we all have conflict. And sometimes the conflict in a story can just be inner conflict. It doesn't have to be an external manifestation of conflict to heighten. It can be our own inner monologue. It can be the way we fight ourselves. It can be the very funny, imperfect way that sometimes we do things we don't want to do. Like we go over to like friends' houses or we go to events and inside we're like, I don't want to be here. Oh my God, how do I get out of here? And we're looking at the watch. And these are very human moments. So mind that for so much richness because there's something there that will connect you. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's just, perhaps what happens with humor is very similar
Yeah.
to what happens, at least in stories. It's what happens
Yeah.
to stories, which is
Yeah.
a lot of people have this highfalutin idea of
Yeah.
what a story is. So when you
Yeah.
tell them, well, did you ever have a, did you ever have a bad boss? Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about one experience with that bad
Yeah.
boss. Okay, that's a story. And they go, is that a story? I think something similar happens with humor.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say to them, have you ever gotten yourself into an embarrassing situation, and they go, "Oh, is that what you mean by funny?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm not expecting you to get up there and tell a joke. I don't even tell jokes. I mean,
Mm-mm.
occasionally I turn things into
Yeah.
jokes, but they're all coming out of. It's always situational
Yep.
comedy in my
Yep.
case. It's
Yep.
not like some funny thing with language that I did there. Usually, it's usually just like I put myself in a weird position and then I did something even weirder to get out of it. But it's not, in my case,
Right.
it's not fiction. I'm actually
Right.
doing those things, but people do or think about doing them all the time. And I think people
Yeah.
just don't get that oh, you think that would be a funny story? It's like,
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Then
Yeah, I think that right. No, it's exactly that. I think there's a lot of, again, myths about humor. One is that humor is comedy or jokes. Being funny is jokes. No, jokes are one part of being funny. You can be funny many different ways. Many different ways, but humor and being funny are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. So if I say, "Hey, be funny," that puts pressure on you because all of a sudden you're thinking, "I have to serve up humor to make someone else laugh." I want to reframe it. What we have to do is ask ourselves, what's something true? Humor is about truth, starts with the truth. What's something true about myself, about my inner monologue, about a situation that I experienced that I can share? And when we lead with the truth, there's always a way to make that humorous. So lead with the truth and lead with making yourself smile and laugh first. Because this all of a sudden, this am I funny? Now all of a sudden we've decided that the jury is outside of ourselves and it's our audience. But how can the audience laugh at something that we ourselves aren't confident about? So we have to own that humor for ourselves first. Is it true? Is it true? Is it human? Is it goofy? Is it like, because I mean, we all have stories that are like, oh man, that was crazy. That in no universe should that have even happened. So when you start with what made you smile, what is crazy, trauma, comedy is just tragedy plus time. If you're distanced from whatever it is, and from storytelling work that you do, if you're on the other side of that hurt, you can talk about it. You can't talk about it while you're in it. We're still processing. But if it's in the rearview mirror and you are through that hurt, get to what's truthful, what has happened to you, what your weird thoughts are, what's weird about your life, what's silly, what's whatever, and focus on what that message is. The humor lies there. And I want us to stop putting pressure on ourselves and saying, is it funny? You'll get to the funny part only when you accept the truth about yourself. The reason so much of what comedians do works is because you'll notice that a lot of times they're poking fun at who? Themselves. They've owned and embraced their own imperfection, and there's room for that. So find what's makes you laugh, what is true for you, and be really rigorous about, is it true? Is this vulnerable? Is it true? And if you kind of, go through that, you're going to get out of this censor that's whether or not you're funny. That is not the question we should be really asking ourselves.
And when it comes to thinking about things that make you laugh or smile,
Yes.
and not worrying about everyone else's, I think it's important to put this out there for all the people who, like me, are, um, overgrown men children, that I don't think fart jokes are the way to go there, because they make me laugh, they make my children laugh uproariously, but they're, you says, things that make you laugh that you should share. That is the type of thing that perhaps you want to keep it in the house, or with
Yeah.
your friends. It's
Yeah.
it's a good barometer, but is not the only check you want to have on your humor. That and some other things, or bedroom related, might be best to keep to
Well,
your friends.
remember, is it true for you, and is there a point? I mean, for me, it's I live in this world every day. um you have to ask yourself, is there a point to this? Yes. Again, humor is not jokes. So as far as fart jokes go, sometimes they're funny, but it's context, right? You're going to tell those fart jokes with your friends. uh but does it serve your story? Does it serve your no? So you always want to ask yourself, is it true for you? What is the intent behind connecting and sharing this with your audience? What is the connection? And the if your intent is to just set up a big story or to heighten a story, then it really has to serve that. So when I say, what's funny to you, I really mean have some discretion about what is vulnerable and true for you. That also makes sense for the story that you're serving. So you have to be, I would think most people would err on the side of being too conservative. They wouldn't be out there
Yes,
doing
yes.
fart jokes. They would go the other way, Francisco. They would be like,
Yes,
share
yes, I
this,
am aware of that.
you
I am
know.
aware of that. I also have been married for a long time. Not everybody in my house shares my sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. It's all men in my house. So even the dog is male. So I get it. I get it. Yeah, totally get it.
Oh,
But what's fun?
all women in my house, but I've co-opted two of them. So
Well, what's
my
great
life is
though.
outnumbered.
Now, see, and that makes for a lot of very funny storytelling, right? What's it like to be outnumbered, be the only guy in the house? I talk about what it's like to be the only woman in my house, and like just what I wanted for my wedding anniversary, which was 2 weeks ago. The only thing I wanted is to wake up and walk down the hall in the morning and like have the boys shut the bathroom door when they're taking a pee. Just like, please, could we just do that? Because that would be a great anniversary present. And
But it's
anybody who
hard to
knows
talk. It's hard to talk when the door is closed. And
exactly.
you can't you can't talk and the door is closed. And if they need to show you something, then it
That's
just
right.
takes so much longer. I mean, it's just
Exactly.
it's
But
not practical.
it's not practical. It's not, I get it. I get it. But those are the kinds of things that anybody who has kids completely relates to, right? We're all just like, yeah, totally, totally get that. And those are the human moments that are just, it's not a joke. It's just you telling the truth about what happens in your house. And I think those are the things that people go, oh my God, yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah.
So one thing you said earlier, you may use this expression a few times. I think you said you call them comedy tools because because I think a lot of people, the biggest challenge I find with most people is just, well, after they understand what a story actually is or what we're looking for when we say story, they don't know where to find them or they don't know that they have any. Then you help them find them, lots of tools for
Yeah.
that. And then, let's say they found a story, it is a good one, has a point, it meets the objective that they
Yeah.
want. What sort of comedy tools could you then apply to that story to make it a little more
Right.
entertaining if that's what you were trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a video which I'll post later today on LinkedIn about this exact topic. So there's a couple different things that you can do. So understand that humor requires heightening, which is like taking it up a notch. So there's one of the foundations of great comedy. We have this concept called the rule of three. So if you want to block, and blocking is a great strategy, like, you want to show a very human protagonist that failed, right? So what are the ways we can block a protagonist? So a protagonist maybe goes and looks for funding and trying to get, her startup off the ground in Silicon Valley. She gets denied, 4 times. She goes to the bank and gets denied. And then that third one is like heighten, heighten, heighten. So she gets denied by the head of this big corporation who happens to be her dad. And he says, no, get out of here. Like, rule of three, just keep heightening, heightening, and heightening. And typically, when you're blocking, that third one is the surprise. So, if I want to do a joke just off the top of my head, it's like, okay, using rule three, it might be something like, people say that I look young, for my age. Well, it's important. I eat right, I moisturize, and I lie my ass off about my age because it keeps me young. It just really does. So heighten, heighten. And then that third choice is like, I didn't see that coming. And only you
Well,
can
one
know what
question,
that
one
is.
question, because you've
Yeah.
used this term a few times, and
Yeah.
it's being used in a term that is in a way that is different than I'm used to it. So
Yeah.
you said blocking. Now I'm
Block.
used to blocking as a stage thing.
Yes,
which has to
that
do
is
with
true.
movement on stage.
Yep.
How exactly are you using that? Because I have a feeling other people listening go, why is she saying blocking?
Yes.
That
So
doesn't
blocking
necessarily.
on stage, yes, blocking on stage is there's several things. In theater, when we use the word blocking, we mean stage. Where are you upstage, downstage? Where are you on the stage? What I'm using blocking in is in writing. So when we talk about comedy writing, blocking means that the protagonist keeps encountering conflict, such that that protagonist does not get what he or she wants. Every protagonist has to have a want, a clearly defined want.
Got
Now,
it.
blocking in writing is not stage blocking. So when we talk about blocking in writing, what makes it funny is that this hero or heroine is just getting denied their want fulfillment. And the
So
more
it's
you
blocking in the same. It's blocking in the same way we use cock blocking.
sort of, yeah. In
It's
this case,
you're
the
putting
cock blocking.
obstacles
That's right. Yeah,
obstacles in the way
yeah.
of the protagonist. Yes.
Think about it as cock blocking the want. Cock blocking the want.
But
Yes.
isn't cock? I mean, that's just that's. I mean, we need to move away from the cock blocking very quickly. But
But
I
it's
think cock blocking the want is kind of redundant, isn't it? I mean,
well, that's true. That's true. I mean, well, that's it's obvious what we want in that case. But it really in this type of terminology, Francisco, and I appreciate you clarifying. We're really talking about denying the hero or heroine their want. And that is funny because every time we think they're going to get close to getting it, they get swatted away. It's very funny. If you ever watch Meet the Parents, if you've ever watched that movie with Ben Stiller, that is a great example of a character getting their want blocked repeatedly. Right? He wants nothing more than to get Terry Polo's character. He wants the girl, but he's got to make the dad like him. And every time he gets close to like making the dad like him, something happens. Right? He the cat goes missing. Right? He sets the house on fire. Before he sets the house on fire, he spikes the volleyball in his sister-in-law's face, and she, right before her wedding, her nose is bleeding, and he's like, I can't do anything right. And so just when we think he's getting close to getting in the sort of the inner circle with Robert De Niro, something blocks that, and that creates comedic heightening because everybody at home is going, oh my god, that's so true, that's happened to me, that has happened to me. So use that type of want blocking to make it fun for the audience. And then eventually you'll have to release it and that conflict and that tension and have some of the need be fulfilled. But it is a great that blocking is a great conflict and tension heightening tool, and it's a great comedic tool. So that's one. But it comes in threes. That's why we call it the rule of three. I didn't create the rule of three, but the rule of three is a very wonderful device. And here's the key again to using the rule of three. Make that third one so crazy, kind of normal, and then like so out there that it's like, oh my God, and the audience will just love it, and it just always works. So it's a very, very, very easy tool for you to do that. Yeah.
so how do you play this? Let me take a step back.
Mm,
What I said before is that for most people, the challenge is finding the story.
yeah.
And I tend to say to most people that storytelling for the vast majority of people, normal people, business people, is not fiction writing. You're finding a story,
Yeah.
you're being clear that there is a point, then you're cutting away everything that does not support the point and make the story more memorable or compelling or
Yeah.
easy to tell.
Yeah.
So how do you well, you have so that's what I think the approach most people tend to take to business storytelling. But then
Mm,
perhaps on the other hand, you have okay, well we have the story, but now we want to do this other stuff to it that makes it more interesting. Now I
mhm.
think the cynical person might go, okay, so you're now getting something that actually happened, you're turning it into fiction, which I know, like I can have more than three things that are horrendous from that happen to me. I'll just pick the ones that match the rule of three, and that's fine. But in some cases, that won't be the case. So how do you balance that? Is the truth the main arbiter there? Big capital T truth, or how do you square that circle?
So, it's no different really from normal storytelling. When we are telling a story, like, it's based on truth. Do we tweak it to fit? Sure. Does it lose the potency of the story because maybe 5% is sort of shaped, strategically? No, no. And it's no different with comedy. It's not about, we're not asking you to make things up, but it's okay to shape and make it very clear. So, if you went for funding and you did get denied, well, just say that. If you got denied a certain number of times, say it. Comedy likes odd numbers for some reason. So maybe you get denied 10 times. But for comedy's sake, we like odd numbers. Why? Because it's just funnier that way. So you might say, instead of 10 times, you might say 17. 17 is a funny number. It's just odd. The point is you got denied funding a lot of times. It's so weird and odd. So what you're doing, and it's a really important point, is that you are starting with truth. We're not asking anyone to make stuff up. Take that story though and think about how it lands. And it's no different from the storytelling that you would do anyway. You are making sure that your story lands and has a certain impact on your audience so that they see the transformation for themselves. And sometimes that means clarifying language. And I don't think that means that you're making it fiction. It just means that you're presenting your story in a certain way to have maximum impact. So don't lie. You're not lying about the story, but I want you to think about, how might we say this in a way that is very true? That is very true. Like, I say all the time that, when I was in tech, I worked really hard and I earned every penny I didn't make. Um, yeah, I'm telling the truth. I'm just telling it in a very funny,
I'm sure
powerful
that
way.
one flies over a lot of people's heads.
Doesn't it? No, it does not. Because in Silicon Valley, if I'm talking to an audience of women,
Fair enough.
they know exactly what I mean. They know exactly
Yes,
what I
true,
mean. And so
true.
it's how you tell that story. And it always depends on who your audience is, Francisco. You're 100% right. Who's my audience? Will they get this? What's the subtext? What's the subtext of me saying I got denied 117 times? Does it matter that it was only 100? No, because once at a certain point, the point of a lot becomes very true. That's the truth. So when I say, I earned every penny I didn't make as a woman in tech, women are like, got it. Men are like, got it. They know exactly what I'm saying. So what's the subtext? If the subtext is really true, I think you can still honor the story. So I don't want people to overthink it. It's not about, making stuff up. Just take that story though, and just as you would any other story that you are fashioning for intentional impact, you're asking yourself, how does this land? Does it make sense to my audience? But you bring up a really good point, which is, who's your audience? If the audience won't get the reference, then that's where you have to be a really good editor and say, I got to take it out, because even my intent might be here, but the audience isn't going to get it. So I think you have a little bit of wiggle room in storytelling, as long as the baseline of the point is true. And I would say it's no different in comedy. True. And then the third one is like heightened truth. It's truth, but it's truth on steroids. So yeah, but it doesn't mean that your underlying message is not true.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess one way to explain this to people would be to say, when you say I was starving, that is heightened truth.
Yes.
You weren't actually starving.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
so
And I think audiences appreciate that, as long as, the point of your story is still really crystal clear. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
so a couple of other points when it comes to humor, particularly
Hmm.
in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So one is this thing that over the last few years must have become much more of a thing for you
Hmm.
than it used to be, which is the minefield of who can and cannot, no, this sounds, it's going to sound wrong, who might or might not be offended by the humor you
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of that, being a
Yeah.
white man. And there's things that I used to joke about fairly freely, and I find that today they are trickier for me to joke about. So
Mm.
I was married for a bit over a year, with a girlfriend that I had when I was in London, and we got married really because she needed a visa. That was the whole purpose of it. At least that's what I believed. I think she believed something slightly different. Um, but
Oops.
when we decided, when we decided to break up with my prompting, um, we kind of had a super friendly divorce and everything. We actually, true story, we actually bought a a divorce kit from a supermarket, because that is a thing, apparently. And six months later, I was talking to her. We were friendly, so I was talking to her, and I said, "Listen, I have to tell you something. I've got a girlfriend." And she said, so have I. And I was like, "Oh, you've got a boyfriend?" I was like, "No, I've got a girlfriend too." uh, and there's a whole thing, there's the whole story I used to tell about that, how I used to say something to people like, I've only ever had four girlfriends. I married two of them, and one of them was a lesbian. And I found that I could say that without any problems 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's become trickier to talk about that now, because all
Yeah.
of a sudden the fact that she was a lesbian is like, well, why is that funny? I was like, well, it's funny that I married someone who turned out to be a lesbian. That the fact
Right.
she was lesbian is no problem at all. But I found that stuff like that has become more sensitive, and it's not, like, I don't
Yeah.
want to get myself into trouble, right? There's other
Yeah.
jokes I can make, or there's
Yeah.
other funny stories I can tell.
Right.
So do you have any hard and fast rules you tell people, like, listen,
Yeah.
let's not mess about with this stuff.
Yeah.
This you cannot do ever, and this you probably shouldn't do.
Yeah, it gets tricky, and I don't like to get into all the things you can't do because that makes people more scared. We're already scared of humor, so I don't want to give a whole bunch of don't do that. It's already kind of humor has the fear for too many people. I'm going to keep it simple. Okay, I would say first rule, never punch down, and audiences know what that is. So they sense meanness, and so punching down just means your jokes cannot and your humor cannot be at the expense of people without power. So generally speaking, if you are a white male, you should not be making jokes or references to anybody really underneath you, because that's pretty much the whole world. um, if you are
My father-in-law is immensely upset with that one.
well,
Like, I can't make this joke. No, you can't. What about this
no,
other joke? No, you
no,
can't. What about
no, no,
no more jokes for you. You've lived a
no.
long life. No more jokes. It's done. You told all the jokes you're gonna tell.
It's like,
Stop
sorry,
it.
buddy, y'all colonized the whole world. You don't need to colonize comedy. Get out, get out. But I think that's a safe bet, and I think it's because for too long, your father-in-law is probably a great guy. It's just for too long that those jokes were done way too much, and they were hurtful. So yeah. The other thing is, if you are not a member of a group, don't comment on the group. I am not a black woman. I shouldn't in no way be commenting on black women. You are not a woman. In no way should you be making references that in some way could be misconstrued about, punching down, to women and being
Can
misogynistic.
I make jokes about Americans? Is that okay?
Sure. Sure. So here's the general rule. Punching up is fine. That means power. So, like, if you're making fun of government, if you're making fun of bosses, if you're making fun of people who have more power than you, then that's okay. If you're not a member of the group, no, you don't get to comment on the group. The other rule of thumb I always have is, because again, humor is more than jokes. I want to be very clear, it's storytelling, but you don't even have to tell a story about that group if you're not in the group. Um, and be careful about it being a relevant fact. So I give you an example. If you go there, there has to be a point for that detail in your story, which you'll appreciate, Francisco, because you're a storyteller. If you drop a detail, it better be relevant and set up something else in the story. So I was working with an executive, and he was telling this story about his nephew, and he kept saying, "My black nephew." And here's the challenge. It was not relevant. And so my challenge to him was, unless you come back to that point, or there's a point you're going to make later about lifting people up, or how your family is very mixed and you love them, or whatever, you don't need that detail, because that detail to the audience is like, well, that's interesting. He doesn't say my white nephew, he just says my black nephew. So they'll ask yourself, is there a point to it? So be very, very, very judicious and careful about it. The general rule is this. Here's the general rule: make fun of situations, not people. I think if you make fun of situations and not people, 99.9% of the time, you won't go wrong. Just what's the situation? Because typically situations, Francisco, are universal. Parenting, crappy bosses, shitty people, bad customer service, anything that we as humans, in-laws, anything that is universally experienced, that tends to be a safe kind of thing. I say stay away from people unless, again, you're punching up people who have more power than you. So really, I think that leaves pretty much the whole world open. But really be honest with yourself. Be honest. Is it necessary? Do I need this? How does it serve my story? And I think if you're tapping into a universal experience, then go for it. Just go for it. Yeah. But be very careful and if you're going to drop a detail like, this executive that your nephew is black, okay, great. But why? Why do you point that out? Have a need for it. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, otherwise you end up in a very complicated situation, which is way more complicated than apparently most people understand it to be, of the case which is somewhat famous in America. Probably no one else in the
Yeah,
world knows about it, but the Central Park Karen, where she's calling she's in the park. She was walking her dog where she shouldn't be. There's some guy telling her that she shouldn't be there, and when she calls the police, she immediately says, this black person is threatening me. And
exactly.
out of it's a very complicated story. Like I've listened to
Yeah.
documentary series about it. It's way more complicated than apparently most people saw on the news.
Yes.
But that is the point that really complicates her stories. At that moment, there didn't seem to be any explanation for the detail apart from a very unkind interpretation of how you feel about black people.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
you know,
Yep.
it is more complicated than that on that one,
Yes.
but
Yes.
yes, yeah, the detail. Otherwise, it's just like, why are you telling us that?
Yeah.
Why do
Why
you
are
want
you?
us to think when you tell us that?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I really think if people just, and that's a great example, and it is more complicated, and you're right, but that's a really good example of like, what that's interesting. That's not in a good way. It's like, you put
no,
that in
it's not.
there, not in a good way. So I think really
Yeah,
honestly, I don't want to make things harder for people because we're already afraid of humor and we shouldn't be. Because humans are funny. We do funny things. Embrace your truth, embrace your own idiosyncrasies and your own imperfections. Make fun of situations, not people. Make fun of your own inner monologue, great. Make fun of situations. Keep it away from people. I think if you really keep it away from people, unless you're poking fun at yourself, you're probably going to be okay. Honestly, I don't want anyone to be so scared that they don't try. But I generally believe if we stay away from people, unless they're more powerful than you, then you're probably going to be okay. You will. Yeah.
so I'm a massive fan of self-deprecating humor, and I tend to
Mhm.
tell people that the best target for any humor is yourself, because
Yeah.
arguably,
Yeah.
you need a complicated argument to complain about someone making fun of themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, well, unless unless someone is going through the Tim Watley approach to humor. Now, Tim Watley was that character in Seinfeld played by Bryan Cranston. He was the
Yeah.
dentist who converts to Judaism, and Seinfeld says that he thinks he converted just so he can make Jewish jokes.
That's
Uh,
it. Well, yes.
so so my point there is, I'm a big fan of self-deprecating humor. I think usually it's the safest and most fun type of humor.
Yeah.
But I have heard that self-deprecating humor is a beautiful, wonderful thing to recommend for
Mhm.
men but
Yes.
for women is
Yes.
not quite the same. So
I
how do you feel
yes.
about that, or what do you
And
tell people about that?
I have written about this, and I just had an article published on this very topic. So you are correct. There is a gender divide. So I want to be very clear, and that doesn't mean never use self-deprecating humor. There are times when you make a mistake. If you make a mistake, owning it with self-deprecation is a great thing. But there is a gender split. You're right. So I've written about this. Women, you overuse it. They over rely on it, and a lot of times women are using it to connect. We're trying to take our status. There's something in, it's a stage term, we're using it to regulate status. So we use it because we're saying, hey, I'm just like you, I'm not higher than you, we're at the same level. The problem with that for women is that too often it is misconstrued as a lack of confidence. And that may not be true, Francisco. That may not be. A lot of very confident women use it, but they use it because it's safe. The problem is that it can, the subtext that it communicates is that they may not have the confidence to do any other type of humor. And so it is gender. We have to be careful as women. But here's where you can self deprecate. If you're going to be, ladies, if you're going to self deprecate, make it about something that is not your area of expertise. So I'm not a chef. I'm not, Padma Lakshmi. Never going to be her. So when I make fun of my
Which is
cooking,
a good thing, because then you don't have to be married to Salman Rushdie.
well, yeah.
So
Which
I
she
mean,
is,
we
she
know
isn't
who got the
anymore.
better end of that deal.
That's right. That's right. And thank God, girl, she ran. But here's the thing: if I make fun of my cooking, in no way, shape, or form is that a reflection of my acumen as a comedian and a storyteller. Right? It's not. I'm not making fun of my expertise. So if you want to use self-deprecation, never, never, never make fun of your area of expertise, ladies. Pick something else. I'm not a gardener. I'm a really lousy gardener. But I'm not a paid gardener. I'm not Martha Stewart out there with a gardening show. So it is very true. We have to look at the gender issues there on self-deprecation. Use sparingly, ladies. Use it when you make a mistake. If you are new to an organization, you do not have the credibility. Nobody knows you. You don't have the earned reputation to over rely on it. Use sparingly. Never, ever, ever make fun of your area of expertise. And that
But
is,
I'm sure that is true for men too.
yeah,
You know,
it is. It is.
you know, I think that the way I interpreted that,
Yeah.
yeah, so I understand, and I'm familiar with the concept of the whole, looks like you don't have enough confidence. The other way I interpreted that is a way that makes the audience, particularly men in the audience, but I'm sure women too, makes us look like much worse human beings, because
Yeah.
there was this idea that, if you're a man and you're coming across as very, people think of you as competent, right? You're up
Yeah.
there doing your thing, and you keep talking about all this, like I do. I keep talking about all these ridiculous things I do,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think a lot of people watch me do that and go, "Oh, actually, he's a moron." They would think, "Oh, he's a human. He's like a person just like me. He's kind of funny." Blah blah. They don't tend to think, "Oh, this is a guy who I thought was competent, but
Yeah.
actually he seems like a complete
Right.
idiot."
Right.
Whereas, but then they might be, not because of me, but it might be because men in general, we don't start from the point of having to necessarily prove ourselves.
Correct.
Whereas
Correct.
a woman in the exact same position
Yes.
doesn't have, from a lot of people, she's not going to have the expectation of, "Oh, no, I know you are incredibly capable, and when you tell me
Right.
these things, I know this is kind of for fun."
Yeah.
A lot of people will go, "Oh, so you are exactly the person I thought you were,
That is right.
deep down inside in my horrible core." So I thought that
That
was the
is.
very less charitable version of why the problem of
Oh,
self-deprecation.
exactly. Well, it's unconscious bias. Some of it is
Hmm.
explicit bias, but that is exactly right. Is that there's research over time that has shown that women pay a humor penalty. However, uh, and I've written about this, so if people want to go check out, on LinkedIn, I've written about this a lot. Just because there are people out there that have bias, and that is exactly right, Francisco, is that we judge women differently. And a lot of times, here's the thing: people aren't aware of their own bias. So we have to navigate things a little differently. And yet, what I'm saying to women is women are just as funny and effective when they use humor. So let's kind of ease up on the self deprecation and use all the other things we're really good at, like storytelling and wordplay and wit, because we're good at it. But just because there's bias out there, and there is. And in fact, I was interviewed for Forbes a couple years ago about this very problem. Just because it exists does not mean women should use humor less. We just have to be aware and be smart about it because women are smart. And somebody else's bias is not my problem. And it's not your problem, ladies. So I want you to own your humor and own your funny. And yes, unfortunately, there is that bias. But you know what I say to that? You know, um, I'm gonna be funny. I'm trained. I'm gonna go do what I do. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's fine. Bye.
So okay, so
So
I got my last question on humor or anything else, pretty much, and it's this. So I and again, I don't necessarily know how to answer this question because there's two sides to the whole using humor,
yeah.
the same as there is to using stories in the professional, corporate world, whatever. So on the one hand, it is sometimes easy for people who are now on the outside of that world to say, yeah, you should do it. You should tell stories. You should use humor because most presentations are boring. Most meetings are boring. Now, no one is going to, like, if you do it well, no one is going to begrudge you from making a meeting or a presentation more interesting or funnier. The pushback from the other side is thinking that it is not appropriate, particularly humor, or some types of stories. So if people want some type of guidance there, where do you say, okay, well, listen, this is when you definitely should try and use humor, or humorous stories, and this is when you might want to tread a little more carefully. I mean, do you even make the distinction? And if you do, what do you tell people to do or not to do there?
I really am not a fan of giving too many rules. And I just told you why. The more I tell you what not to do, it heightens your own fear. It heightens the more we go, don't do this, don't do that. I honestly believe humor isn't a storytelling tool exclusively. Humor is for ourselves. It's how we show up in the world. It's our own presence. I mean, every day I'm going to laugh and I'm going to joke around and be me. Why? Because I'm doing it for me. Why should I give up being happy because somebody else has a problem? So I'm a big believer in we we've compartmentalized humor like it's a checklist. Okay, did I add humor? And I'm saying we have to think bigger and more organically, which is the way we show up in the world. We have to, again, humor's not jokes. It's, do I make myself laugh and smile? Can I bring that to the table? So I think that the more we recognize that humor is organic, it's not something that we pull out once in a while, like Halloween, like a Halloween costume and put it on, the less fear we're going to have about it. So I don't compartmentalize it like that. I think that show up when you are telling stories as your best self, you're probably funny and you're making your friends laugh. So I think you do have to read a room though. If you are doing context appropriate things where you're telling a story, just read a room and be smart about it. But I honestly believe that there are very few instances where telling a story well with humor is not appropriate. There's very few instances. I think we unfortunately go into fear mode way more than we need to. Just be smart, you
Yes.
know?
Yes, I think that maybe the first boardroom meeting in a new company might not be the time you tell the story of trying to iron your trousers while wearing them. That you might want to save for the second or third board meeting.
Depends.
Maybe
Maybe.
not the first.
Maybe. But if it was me, I would do it at the very first one. Why? Because that's who I am. I guess what I'm saying is bring your personality to it. I'm a believer that um, if we hold back, we're holding back who we are, but be smart about it. You're not doing a comedy show, you're telling a story to the board. So if you're going to use humor, use it purposefully to advance the story, to advance the story. But I also do believe you should tell it like you. And if it means bringing yourself to the boardroom, then yes, you should. Humor's
Well,
not a
there's it's a little. It's a
Yeah.
little bit of a contradictory direction there, Kathy. You say show up as yourself, but be smart about it. Being smart about it is not really congruent with my
I
usual
disagree. I
self.
disagree. I disagree. In other words, you're not there for a comedy show. So, if there's stories that you would tell your friends, this is not your friends, this is a board meeting. But that doesn't mean
Sure.
that you can't if your natural inclination is to bring a little lightheartedness to your presentations. Why would you not bring that to the board meeting? You're assuming that the board is all serious and that the board are not made up of human beings who love to laugh. And I'm challenging that notion. I'm saying that is not true. I have dealt with I've been on boards, and we're human beings who want you to present information in a really profound way. And if it means human connection, then yes. So I do not believe it's incongruent. When I say be smart about it, just understand which stories. It doesn't mean you should
I'm
leave with
heightening the situation here.
yes, you're hating, and
Clearly.
and I think I bring that up because I love the way you bring that up. I think it's an important question, and I do believe when we stop treating humor like an on and off switch, our lives will be improved. Humor is a continuum, Francisco, and sometimes we dial it back, sometimes we ramp it up based on situation, but we never go to work. We should never go to work and turn that switch completely off because we're not robots, we're people. So I'm always going to advocate for humor as a continuum, not a switch. That's just how that's me.
Well, if I'm familiar enough with your work, then I believe that 92.3% of us are not robots. The
That's right.
rest we're still
That's right.
we're still in doubt about.
Look, the rest of them, you and I both know we've had some bosses that we're not really sure about. We're like, no, I'm not sure you're human. But the rest of us
Yes.
are. The rest of us are.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, uh, it would improve my opinion of humankind if I found out they were actually evil robots. But alas, there is. I don't believe that artificial quote unquote intelligence has gotten to that point yet.
Well, I
So
know that there are robots out there that have better personalities than some people. That I know.
yes, that also might not be a high bar to jump over. Uh,
Totally
and
not.
on that note, where do you want to send people? Like, if you have to pick one or two places for people to follow up some of your stuff, what's
Sure.
where should they go?
You can go to two places primarily. That is my website, which is keepingithuman.com. And you can go to LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn as well. A lot of the things that, Francisco and I talked about today are articles and videos that I've talked about there because they're really important. It's really important stuff. So you can connect with me there.
Perfect,
Yeah.
Kathy. Thank you very much. I don't think it's been proven that we cannot coexist in the same universe without imploding or having to behead each other, which which is somewhat of a relief.
I can't. Wouldn't want to behead you if that was even an option. I wouldn't. I'd be like, well, who? I need other funny people around me to keep me entertained and happy and joyful. So no, no.
I'll take that. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and until next time.